Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join Martin, Dave, Spencer and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
So welcome back to the T2 Hubcast with me, Martin Johnson.
And me, Dave Pendleton.
Dave, how the devil are you?
I'm all right.
Good.
And you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you.
Nice.
We've been busy. We wanted to get back in. We haven't done as much hubcasting of late as we usually do because we've been out on the road delivering.
Doing delivery. Sure.
We've been engaging with customers. We've been doing one-to-one coaching. So we've got to make more time, Dave, to do more of these. And I think this hubcast today comes on the back of a session Dave and I delivered on Monday.
Yep.
With a customer, a large customer around sales, and they wanted us to come in and work with their sales teams. And it was an outbound telephone sales team. So these people are tasked with being on the phone, making 100 calls a day, outbound sales calls, cold calls, if you like, and trying to basically sell products.
Yeah.
And what they wanted is they were jumping straight into product, Dave. So their sales manager was saying, listen, they're getting on the phone and they're jumping straight into selling the features, functionality and benefits of the product. And we want them to not do that. We want them to sort of navigate the early part of that call a little bit better. So we were tasked with going in. We had 2 hours. We delivered some really cool stuff. And we just thought we'd take a section of it, which you delivered, Dave, and we'd debate it on this podcast.
Sure.
The section we're going to debate is what we call the mission of discovery. Now, if anybody has followed what we do at T2 and in sales, the mission of discovery is how do we find out the key client opportunities or problems, the things we're trying to solve before we go into the sell.
Yeah.
And Dave, you've spent 20 odd years in L&D and most of that has been around sales development. And you just took them through a great section around how you ask 3 different types of questions to navigate that mission of discovery. Yeah. So you actually end up not even selling. You sort of just aligning products and services to what they need. Yeah. And I loved it. Yeah. So do you want to just introduce the 3 types of questions and then we'll just go into them one by one, Dave, and maybe just brainstorm it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess the setup is that, all salespeople have been through some sort of sales training type scenario in the organization that they work for. Some of it very quick and fleeting, some of it much more long-winded and so forth. But most salespeople have been through some kind of sales training around open questions, closed questions, rhetorical questions, probing questions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess, what I learned a good few years ago is actually some question types that are just smarter than that. Why do we want to ask a question that we get a yes, no answer?
Yeah. And that's
what's the point in that?
Yeah. That's the challenge, isn't it? Because then you get yourself down a rabbit hole where you're sort of trying to, it's quite awkward. If you asked a closed question and someone says no.
So what?
Yeah, exactly. So then you're trying to think of another question on the spot. Absolutely. And then all of a sudden it feels very salesy and people are trying to get rid of you. And I think the art of the telephone sale is, or even like that lead generation aspect of it is you've got to buy yourself time on the phone.
Yep.
You've got to signal friend, not foe. Yep. But you have to engage in a more natural conversation rather than it be
interrogation.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I think in the work you do, Dave, with customers, that's what you get across really, really well, because I think even the most tenured sales team sometimes actually stop and think and go, yeah, I'm getting into like an interrogation too early in the process. So anybody listening to this hubcast, Dave, who are a salesperson, whether it's telephone based or field based, if an element of your role is to open up net new opportunities through calling, through emailing, whatever it might be, we're going to take calling on this particular hubcast. How can you do that a bit more effectively?
Absolutely.
So you believe in a line of questioning.
Yep.
That's well placed, timely, relevant, and that flows naturally
and sequential.
Yeah. So what is let's do this sequentially then. What's the first type of questions salespeople should be asking on a sales call?
Okay. The first type of question that I've got is simply called a background question.
Right. Background questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So all we're trying to do is discover as much as we can about this customer, their supply chain, the product types, the amounts, the frequency, the logistics, and all those fantastic answers that will give us some really good insight about what this customer's business looks like.
Yeah, and the reason that's important when you speak about this in rooms and in your talks is because if we're going to have a successful conversation around when we get to the meaty stuff, we can't be guessing around the customer situation.
No, exactly.
If we're guessing, then we're going to find ourselves down those rabbit holes very quickly because we're going to end up with a lot of no answers, right?
Absolutely.
So by doing the background questions first, you're almost setting the scene and clarifying the current environment, the current situation, which then leads on to me asking well-placed and timely questions. So give me an example of what you mean by a background question, Dave.
Well, I mean, you just very simply work with the 4 W's and the H,
all right,
which are the who, where, when, what, and how.
Yeah.
So who is it you get your product from?
Yeah, I know that sounds simple, right? Who are you currently using?
Yeah, absolutely.
You might already know that, you might not, but who are you currently using? Is it just a sole provider? Do you have multiple providers?
Absolutely.
What's the split of the percentage of orders you place with them? So you're just establishing who's currently providing with you. Yeah, absolutely.
How frequently do you get your product? When does it arrive? With what frequency?
And of course, this is where we're using an analogy here of a physical product.
Yeah,
but let's say you provide a service.
Could be service exactly the same.
It's still relevant. You're still asking background questions about who provides this service.
How frequently do you use it?
Yeah. Do you have a maintenance package?
Is it more beginning of the month, end of the month?
Do you pay monthly? Whatever it might be. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So background questions are basic questions for you to establish the current situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And very rarely, this is a really important point, very rarely will there be just a yes, no answer. Yeah. If at all. Because if you ask how many, it would be kind of idiotic for them just to say yes or no.
Yeah.
How many gets an answer?
Let me ask you a question at this point. Assuming that the client is engaging in the conversation, this is great.
Yeah.
What about when you get those really tricky customers where you're trying to ask background questions to establish the current situation, but they're interrupting you halfway through because they're going, listen, just tell me, what is this about? Do you recommend that they jump straight into, therefore, then what this is about? Or do you reckon because if you don't answer their questions, this is the thing, and if they try and stay in the process, they're just gonna piss the person off.
Yeah.
They're just gonna elevate their emotions.
Sure.
So if someone jumps in and says, you're trying to ask background questions, who do you currently use? What's your need? How often? And they go, whoa, hang on a second. Did you say your name was Dave? Yep, Dave. Right. What's this about? Because I'm busy. Where did they go from that? Did they try and stay in the process, or do you have to acknowledge the situation and get straight to the point?
Yeah, well, I think there's obviously been a little bit of work up front. So I mean, I guess we've missed a little bit of the process on this.
So this is assuming you've done the start of the call.
Assuming we've asked permission to ask questions. So assuming we've got past the gatekeeper, we're talking to the right person, and so on and so forth. Then we've almost gained permission to start asking these questions. But I mean, I guess an answer to your question would very simply be, I'm asking you a bunch of questions because I really want to see if our business can help your business. Yeah. Either save you time, save you money, help you solve some problems that you might have with your supply of whatever this thing is.
Yeah, cool. And that's a really important point. I think you've answered it well. This is assuming you've done the opening of the call. So we have 3 steps, don't we? You've got to, it's on another Hubcast. You've got to engage in dialogue. Yep. You've got to create some familiarity. Yep. You've got to establish a reason.
Correct.
Assuming you've done those well, then you're in the background questions already.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you've jumped into background questions too early, you've probably not done the prior. So
you're not going to get much joy out of that. For
exactly.
Because you won't ask permission. Essentially.
So what we're talking about here is make sure you've navigated the early part of the call where you've entered into dialogue. I am friend, not foe. Yeah. You've created some familiarity and rapport between you, and you've established the reason, and they're still on the call and going, okay, I will give you some time. Yeah. Then you start with background questions.
Sure.
Cool. So background questions, just to reiterate, it's not asking anything else than the base level questions of what is the current landscape, what is the current situation, who provides you with what, how often, etc., etc.
Correct. Just trying to get a basic understanding of this person's world, if you like.
Cool. All right, great stuff. So next type of question then, assuming you ask a great background question and you get an answer which excites you, salespeople then want to jump straight into the sell, but we're not there yet. So what's the next type of question you would advise that you move on to?
Well, the next type of question is what I call issue questions. So we can only ask an issue question when we hear something, when we hear an answer off of a background question that gives us like a little hook that we might be able to explore a little further, if you like. So, for example, we ask where this person, this customer, this opportunity gets their stuff from. And they say, well, do you know, we don't necessarily have a specific supplier. We use multiple suppliers. So I guess me being a sensible human being might think to myself, actually, this might cause problems. We don't know for sure whether it will or it won't. But what we can do is say, after we found out that answer, we can say, oh, hey, listen, I think that's an interesting thing that you get this thing from multiple suppliers. Do you have any issues with that?
So these are problem questions.
Well, they are questions designed to uncover problems, issues, or areas of dissatisfaction.
Like it. So we've asked background questions.
Yep.
We've found out a bit of information.
Yep.
Now we want to just progress it to ask a problem or issue question,
Yep.
which is like, is there anything wrong with that? Is that causing you any pain?
Correct.
So that's where the sale's going to come from, because this is an important one. I'm going to ask you a question on here. Let's say you progress and ask if there's any issues with that. And they say, do you know what, Dave? No, it's fine. We have great suppliers and everything's tickety-boo. What's your advice then?
Ask another background question.
Love this.
Don't kill yourself. Don't murder yourself trying to uncover pain that's not there.
Salespeople sometimes try to create the issue or the problem when clearly the customer doesn't have one.
Sure.
So rather than just doing that, just leave that be. So if you say, right, they have, like they said, we have multiple providers, and you go, does that cause you an issue with
billing, maybe?
Billing or consistency in lead times? Does it cause you a problem? And they go, do you know what? No, it works for us, because if one can't supply us, the other one can.
Absolutely.
So we've always got a plan B. Yeah. If that's the case, say, right, great, fine. You've got to come back to another background question to find another avenue. Yeah. Because what people try and do is they try and stay in that lane and force the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be tempting for a salesperson to say, well, surely that must cause you problems with billing. Surely paying 6 bills at the end of a month rather than just paying 1 bill, that must be time heavy for your accounts department and so on and so forth. And if they say, well, no, or actually, do you know what I mean? I don't care about accounts as long as I get the gear. It's just going to frustrate the prospect.
It is.
And that's the last thing we want.
And they're going to feel like you're trying to force a sale.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
So great tip at this point on this. Ask a background question. And then when you ask if there are any issues with that, and they say, no, it's fine, actually, it's a great service or whatever it might be.
Fantastic.
Don't try to progress that any further. Acknowledge it, come back into another background question, which might be on... it might be, for example, if you've asked a question around multiple suppliers, it might then be the other question might be, what's your lead times? And they might go, well, it's around 5 to 7 days. And you might then be able to pick up that you can do it in 2 to 3 days. So you can ask an issue question. Does the sometimes 5 to 7 days cause you a problem?
Yeah.
And if they go, actually, sometimes when we need an urgent order, yes, it does.
Yeah, they can't do it.
That bang, now you're into an issue that you can solve.
Correct.
So don't try and force the first one. Come back to find what you might be able to solve. Love that.
Yeah, exactly.
So is it normal on sales calls then, Dave, that you could, as a salesperson, you could be going through background questions, issue questions, background issue 2 or 3 times before you find something you can latch onto?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess your hidden agenda or your alternative motive for the background questions is, as I said, it is to uncover as much information as you can, but it is to try and discover those pain points.
Yeah.
Because as you know, my philosophy of what a salesperson should be is nothing more than a problem solver.
Yeah.
The thing is, we can't solve problems unless we uncover them.
Yeah.
Because I can't read your mind. I don't know what's causing you pain. No.
But you can't jump straight into problems before you know the background.
Absolutely. We've got to create a feeling of trust and rapport. We've got to feel that the customer prospect has got to feel slightly relaxed. I'm happy that this person is actually trying to understand my business rather than just sell me product.
Cool. Love it. So let me just repaint the journey we've gone on so far. Sure. Use the same opportunity, and then I want to progress to the next level.
Yeah.
So the salesperson started on the phone. They've asked a background question of who currently provides your products. So who currently provides your products? The client has responded and said we have multiple providers.
Mm-hmm.
They then shifted to the issue questions and went, does that cause you a problem having multiple suppliers? And the client responds with, no, actually it doesn't. It gives us a plan B if one person's unable to provide. So you've come back to a background question and they've gone, okay, what's the lead times for most of those suppliers that you use?
Yep.
They've gone, well, actually, it's 5 to 7 days. So you've gone back into an issue question and gone, does that cause you a problem sometimes when you need products really urgently? And the client's responded with, yes, it does. So that's the journey so far.
Yep.
Right. So now you're onto you've got an issue.
Correct.
You've asked about it. You've got an issue and your lead times are 2 to 3 days.
Yep.
So there's an
opportunity. Or even
next day, there's an opportunity for you here. Sure. Right. Even if you're just accepted as another supplier on their books, there's an opportunity here, right? Okay, so what's the next? So they've acknowledged that the lead times are an issue. What's the next type of question the salesperson, the third and final type of question they should transition to?
Well, of course, the tempting thing here for salespeople is just to start selling, right?
Right. There's an issue. I'm going to sell against it. We can do 2-day lead times.
We've got the hook.
Yeah.
We've got the old-fashioned hook. Great, there's an opportunity. Oh, so listen, Mr. Customer, we can do it in 1 to 2 days. In fact, we might even be able to do next day. How does that sound? Well, we've not built enough urgency yet.
Right. And so there's another layer to come.
As you rightly identify, really we need to carry out another couple of stages, really. And the next question type is what we call an anxiety question.
Yep.
So I suppose we uncover the pain, we poke the pain by asking problem questions. Now we want to grow the pain. So let me ask you, Mr. Smith, you've just mentioned that sometimes all we're doing here is reiterating what the customer said because they can't disagree with it. So let me just remind you, Mr. Smith, am I right in saying when your lead times are 5 to 7 days, sometimes you do need things more urgently? Is that right? You would say yes, of course. So and you obviously said that does cause you a bit of a problem sometimes. Yes, it does. What knock-on effect does that sometimes have on your business or your customers?
Yeah.
So it's the knock-on effect.
So that's the anxiety question.
That's your anxiety question. Because we want them to actually bring to the front of the mind the problems and issues, not that it causes them, but it causes their customers in turn.
And the reason you call this an anxiety question is because it's designed, it sounds cruel, but it's not. It's designed to create a level of anxiety and realization in the mind of the customer or prospect that says, do you know what? That's not acceptable.
Why am I settling for
That's
this?
not acceptable. I need to do something about that.
Correct.
So let me just replay this because I love this. So you've had a go at an initial background question and a problem question that didn't really go anywhere.
Yep.
You've come back to another background question on lead times.
That's the same topic, by the way.
Yeah, that's developed into an issue question where we found the issue, but now we want to grow that pain. So before we jump in with the sale and what we can do in that area, we've gone, what knock-on effect does that have on your business and most importantly, your customers?
Correct.
That's an anxiety question that before we're going to get them sell, we're trying to bring it alive in their mind that there is a need for potential change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love it.
We're trying to get the customer to create their own urgency rather than us create the urgency for them. Because, we've got a saying that logic is very rarely persuasive. Me telling you that it's a problem might work, it might not. You telling you that it's a problem will work every time.
Yeah. Everybody always thinks it's a good idea if it's their idea in the first place. So then, because that's the art of selling without selling. It's the art of them feeling like they're buying rather than you're selling.
Correct.
So love that. So there's 3 types of questions we're saying here. You've got to ask background questions to progress to issue questions.
Yeah.
And only when there's an issue can you progress to an anxiety question, which is really going to elevate that urgency and compelling reason to buy.
Sure, absolutely.
So
do you want me to just chuck a final question type in there?
Yeah. I mean, so when you ask that anxiety question, the customer probably would, I don't know if you see this, Dave, but when you ask anxiety questions, they pause for a bit.
Absolutely.
Because you're saying, what is the knock-on effect or impact on your customer? And they actually look upwards, don't they? It's like, well, obviously it's not good. And, we're very fortunate that our customers stay loyal, but sometimes they need product urgently. So we need it urgently.
And again, listen, let's not beat ourselves up. If it does get to that point where we've managed to ask the anxiety question, they say, well, do you know what? Our customers are really understanding. So actually, it's okay. We just start again.
Yeah.
With a new background
because
question.
clearly there's no anxiety there.
Let's not
right?
try and build it where it doesn't exist.
Love that. So what's then? So at this point, right, Dave? The temptation is we've done background question, issue question, established there's an issue. We've asked the anxiety question. We've elevated the need and the emotion. Correct. They're now thinking about this. They want to jump in and say, "Listen, we can do 24-hour lead times." Blah blah blah. Is there another layer? There's another layer. We're still not selling yet.
Don't sell yet.
Right. Okay.
It's still not there yet.
Go on then. What's the next part?
The final bit is it kind of helps towards your close, really. Because as we know, there's an awful lot of salespeople out there who are just not very good at asking for the business.
Yeah.
Not very good at closing. So all we've got to do here is just, again, replay what the customer's just said. So, Mr. Smith, let me just clarify. You said that this is a problem. It causes you problems here with your customers. This is the knock-on effect. So would it help if there was a service out there that could alleviate those problems with next day delivery?
Yeah.
You know that you can supply next day delivery. So all you're getting them to do is confirm a need from their perspective, which aligns with a service that you can provide.
And this aligns when, as you know, Dave, when I talk about the close and I talk about the mutually agreed plan, rather than the salesperson driving the agenda, you're flipping it on its head. And I always say at the end of a sales meeting, you should be, if it's a good meeting, you should be saying to the prospect, what do you now need to see from me in order to come to consider this and come to a conclusion and be quiet? What you're saying here is you're just going to replay the situation and then finish with a, would it help or would it be of value? Would it be of value if you could have an extra provider in your portfolio that could deliver with next day delivery? And at this point, they've got no other option but to say, well, of course.
Absolutely, it would. It would really help in some occasions, yeah.
And then it's sort of like, well, listen, we can do it.
Created the wrong reason to buy.
Listen, we could do that for you. That's almost like the final line, isn't it? You know, Absolutely. It's like it happens organically.
Correct.
Love it. That's really, really powerful. I think one of the things for me is, and it would take practice and repetition for this, Dave.
Yeah, it would.
And for me, I think you need, if you was a salesperson, because every question around background issues and anxiety would differ depending on the company and the product. Mm-hmm. You have to create your own questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I would have like a battle sheet, you know, like a laminated guide where I've got 12 questions I can ask, which are background questions. Mm-hmm. I've got then 12 progressive issue questions, and then I've got some killer anxiety questions. Yeah. So I can actually just go in. If I'm on the phone, I can look down and I can find which one I want to choose and play in the right situation. But almost like you said, if they're not working, just come back to the start of the process and try another one.
Sure.
Yeah. And it takes time.
Yeah, it really does. It takes time. It takes practice. It takes a really great knowledge of your business, your supply, your products, and so forth. Because if we're trying to solve problems, we've got to know how we can solve those problems like immediately. So in terms of your clock speed's got to be great. Because the last thing we want to do is take the customer down a process and they say, yes, it really would help having a business on board or a new supplier who could send stuff next day, and then we can't supply next day.
Yeah.
So that's the last thing we want to do.
Yeah, the false promise.
Correct.
Yeah, and I guess clock speed, you mentioned there, this is about clock speed. Reading the conversation, because the conversation's got to be natural. It can't be too scripted.
Correct.
Learning where to, navigate the conversation and come back. That's the ability to think on your feet. And we always talk about clock speed in sales.
And it's the ability to link the questions together, because they have to link and they have to be sequential. Yeah. If you start asking the sort of payoff questions towards the end at the beginning, you're going to sound like a crank and you're going to get nothing back.
And also listening with intent to understand, because if you're just listening to some information and you're skipping ahead and ahead, but you don't truly understand what the customer's saying, you're gonna fall foul. Yeah. But I love that, and I think the biggest message from this Hubcast for me is, too often do specifically telephone people because they're under pressure. Let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're under pressure because people are trying to get rid of them from the start.
Yep.
We believe that the best telephone salespeople out there who we've trained and we've engaged with, we always teach them, you've got sort of 4 steps. You've got to engage in dialogue at the start. Mm-hmm. Your first 10 seconds is crucial. Yep. You've then got to create some familiarity to settle the conversation down. You've got to establish the reason for the call, and assuming then you're still on that call, you've then got to go on the mission of discovery, which is step 4. Absolutely. And the mission of discovery is exactly what we've been talking around. 3 types of questioning that you piece together, and if you can't find something, you just go back to the start and you start again.
Correct.
But you're looking for background questions to establish the situation. You're then looking for issue questions to find out if there's actually a problem with that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then assuming you've got that, you're looking to hit a couple of anxiety questions to hit the pain points that's currently,
correct,
giving them or their customers.
Which is what helps create the compelling
reason to buy
in the mind of the buyer.
Love it.
Not in the mind of the seller.
Love it. And assuming you've done that, then a close generally starts to happen organically rather than it be a tactic.
The close is almost just a reiteration of what we've said.
And a mutually agreed plan of the next steps.
Correct.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Dave, loved that. I think that'll do for us. We're on 25 minutes. We'll post this one to the hub. And if anybody's interested and wants to know more about the workshops we run and how we deep dive into training sales teams and organizations on how you effectively master this questioning, then, get in touch with us and we'll have a chat with you.
Absolutely.
Dave Pendleton, thank you very much. And
pleasure as always.
We'll see you for another T2 Hubcast.
Ta-ra.